It's fall of my sophomore year, and I'm sitting at my computer looking for a volunteer opportunity. I need something that'll be relatively close to my house, something that ends early enough so I can go home and do my homework, and something that'll hopefully look really, really good on my Common App for college. A few days later, I walk into the food pantry on High Street. It perfectly checked all of my boxes. And, if I'm being honest, it was also the first thing that popped up when I searched volunteering in Brookline. So on my first day, they put me on bag making duty in the back. This involves getting one paper bag and putting it inside of another paper bag to reinforce it so it doesn't rip when you put the food inside. But here's the problem. I have a really terrible cold. And I don't know if this happens to you, but when I get sick, I become super sensitive to noise. And suddenly, the rustling of the paper bags is the noisiest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. To make things worse, this really soft-spoken guy volunteering next to me is trying to have a conversation with me, and I can't hear him because it feels like my head is blowing up. Basically, my day's miserable. But next week, I come back. And it's not just because I still need the volunteer hours, it's because I'm genuinely starting to love the people who I'm working with. My manager is this really funny guy who's constantly cracking jokes, and the guy from my first day, when I can actually hear him, turns out to be lovely. Plus, I had just moved to Brookline, and I didn't really have any friends yet, so I couldn't pass up the opportunity at a once-a-week scheduled hangout with people other than my parents. As I keep working there, I'm finding things out about the people who are coming to the pantry. I guess that before I started volunteering, I thought that people who came would be more invisible or obvious need. Maybe homeless individuals or people with disabilities who couldn't work and therefore needed the food assistance. But everyone who's coming in kind of just looks like my neighbors. There are teenagers and people clearly coming straight from work, a nurse in scrubs or a man in an MBTA uniform. Eventually, I graduate from bag making duty and they put me at a food distribution table in the front where I can actually talk to the clients, which is wonderful because there are very few things that I love more than talking. I start getting to know the clients and I'm hearing a lot of different languages: Japanese, Spanish, Portuguese. Eventually, I scribble on my own name tag, "Я говорю по-русски," or I speak Russian. Now, this is something that really excites the Russian-speaking clients, and they start to really open up to me. They tell me about their lives, their families, and they ask me about myself. More often, they ask me where I'm from. It's a bit of a complicated question because I was born in Sochi, Russia, and then I moved to Cyprus, and then England, and then Florida, and now I'm here. And as my junior year gets closer, the questions that I'm being asked at the food pantry start mirroring the questions that I'm being asked at school and pretty much everywhere else. Where are you thinking of going to college? This is a question of particular importance to me because college is actually the reason that I moved to Brookline. You see, when I lived in Florida, I lived in this really small town called Celebration, and it was great. The weather was beautiful, most of my friends lived nearby. The only problem was that my school was pretty terrible. It was really overpopulated. We had to pull trailers up to the campus just so we could fit all of the students. The students weren't super academically motivated, and there were fights almost every single day. So my family and I decided that we should move to a better academic environment. We chose Massachusetts because my sister had lived there and loved it, and my parents decided to leave it up to me to decide which town we're gonna live in. I know. So I do my research, and about 3 weeks later, I sit my parents down at the dinner table and present them my choice in the best way I know how: a PowerPoint presentation. So I click through all the slides, and I show them the pros and cons of the 3 choices that I've narrowed it down to: Newton, Lexington, and Brookline. All the choices are academically sound. They have a lot of really interesting activities and extracurriculars like debate and lacrosse, which I'm looking forward to continuing. But ultimately, I want something a little bit more urban and definitely closer to Boston. So I go with Brookline. And Brookline definitely meets and exceeds all of my expectations. It's also pretty different from Florida. The academics are much better, and there are so many really great activities and programs. I'm especially interested in the arts program. And my mind is absolutely blown when I find out that there's an entire building just for freshmen. I also find a lot of students talking a lot about college, and the conversations that they're having sound really different than the ones that I was used to having back home. In Florida, when students would say that they were applying to Harvard, it was more like a joke and an impossibility. Here, it was a frequent reality. I also find that a lot of students are more competitive. They're constantly comparing their SAT scores, their GPAs, what programs they did over the summer, and discussing what would give them a more competitive edge during the admissions process. Honestly, these conversations are making me feel a bit unprepared, and it's a feeling that I really didn't anticipate when I was putting together my PowerPoint. I also find that a lot of students aren't really thinking about how they're going to pay for college. For example, one time I was talking to my friend and I asked her, "Have you filled out the financial aid forms?" And she said, "No." Why would I do that? Whereas by my senior year, it's definitely something that I'm freaking out about. And I'll admit, there was more than one night spent in tears and many more nights frantically searching for as many scholarships as I could find and applying to all of them. I keep catching myself thinking, what was the point of my parents and I moving to Brookline if I get into a really good school and I can't afford to go? So earlier this year, I decided that I should look for a way to save more money. And I decided to ask the manager at my food pantry if I can start collecting food there too. The day that I decide to ask, he looks at me and he says, "Yeah, sure, you could start collecting food." "For a friend?" And I say, "No, for me." Immediately, his face drops and he says, "Oh my God, Maria, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that you were in such a situation." And I downplay it. I say, "It's cool, it's fine. I'm just collecting food." But then he proceeds to apologize profusely for the next 3 minutes, which kind of only makes me feel worse. And the day comes around for me to start collecting my food. And for some reason, I'm still feeling ashamed about it, so I try to do it in a sneaky way. This proves to be impossible because in order to get my food from the pantry to my car, I have to carry 3 humongous bags all the way through the food pantry in front of my fellow volunteers, clients, and oftentimes my classmates. And I know that they're not judging me, but for some reason, it kind of still feels like they are. Now, I'll share a secret with you guys. I recently committed to the George Washington University, where I'm going to be studying international relations. Thank you. And I got a full scholarship. That's also how I felt when I got the news. But for some reason, when I say that, people's face doesn't change. They don't spend the next few minutes apologizing to me, saying how sorry they are that I had to get a scholarship in order to be able to go to college. They're just happy for me. They don't see the bag of food and the financial aid as the same thing. But why? They serve the same purpose, to ensure more stability so you have the opportunity to build a more secure future for yourself. One is just a little bit more immediate than the other. When I move to DC, I'm looking forward to starting at a new food pantry because I know that the people there will be kind and supportive. And now I have more of an appreciation for belonging on both sides of the table. Thank you.